The price of lies. Noah woke up that Monday morning as usual, but something weighed differently on his chest. He looked at the ceiling of his modern apartment, acquired so quickly, and for the first time in months, felt a strange tightness. At 23, he had everything a young engineer could dream of, but there was a secret that no one knew. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the diplomas on the wall. The civil engineering certificate hung proudly. Noah got out of bed and went to the kitchen to make coffee, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the empty apartment. He thought of his father, Addison, that calloused-handed man who had always dreamed of seeing him graduate. Addison was a foreman, a simple man who learned everything through practice, working under the hot sun on construction sites. He never had the chance to study, but he carried in his heart a dream bigger than himself. He wanted his son to be different, to use his head instead of his hands, to have a better future. Noah remembered the day he received his engineering scholarship. The gleam in his father's eyes was indescribable. Daisy, his mother, smiled discreetly that day, but Noah noticed something in her gaze. She knew her son dreamed of management, of pure numbers and business strategies, not of projects and constructions. But how could he disappoint a father who had worked so hard for that moment? Noah swallowed his own dreams and immersed himself in engineering books, determined to make it work. The first few years were difficult, especially the architectural design subjects, which seemed like a foreign language to him. While other students drew with passion, Noah felt only frustration in front of the drawing boards. He excelled at structural calculations and applied mathematics, but creating something from scratch seemed impossible. It was in college that Noah discovered a way out, a way to survive without having to confront his limitations. He realized he had a gift for conversation, for gaining people's trust. Noah began to approach his most talented colleagues, especially the more introverted and generous ones. With an easy smile and the right words, he managed to get others to help him with his projects. At first it was just help here and there, an opinion, a suggestion. But little by little, Noah transformed it into something bigger, into a way to guarantee his grades. He graduated with honors. His father cried with pride at the ceremony, and Noah felt a mixture of joy and guilt. The construction company Morrison Associates hired him immediately, impressed by his impeccable resume. It was one of the largest companies in the city, with multi-million-dollar projects and a team of brilliant engineers. Noah should have been over the moon, but deep down he knew the real challenge was just beginning. On his first day of work, he looked around the modern office and saw his colleagues engrossed in complex projects. He felt the same chill down his spine that he felt in college when faced with a blank sheet of paper. Noah knew he would need to use his persuasive skills again, but this time the stakes were much higher. He observed each colleague discreetly, studying their personalities and routines. There was John, a shy boy with glasses who always ate lunch alone, engrossed in his drawings. There was Marcus, competitive and ambitious, always the first to arrive and the last to leave. And then there was Sophia, a talented engineer with expressive eyes, who seemed to observe everything with unusual attention. Noah didn't imagine at that moment that Sophia would become the person responsible for changing everything. He simply smiled, adjusted his tie, and decided he would do whatever was necessary to maintain appearances. After all, disappointing his father wasn't an option. Missing that opportunity was out of the question. Noah took the last sip of coffee and left home that morning, unaware that he was planting the seeds of his own destruction. Sometimes what we do to achieve our goals ends up becoming exactly what destroys us. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. The perfect mask. The first few months at Morrison Associates passed like a whirlwind for Noah. He would wake up early, put on his impeccable suits, and always arrive at the office with a smile on his face. In everyone's eyes, Noah was the promising engineer, polite and always willing to help. The office was on the 12th floor of a mirrored building in the city center. Huge windows let in natural light that illuminated the desks covered in plants and models. Noah occupied a station near the window, from where he could observe the activity of the city below. He developed a meticulous routine to maintain his image. He always arrived 15 minutes early, greeted everyone by name, and asked about their weekends. Noah knew that being liked was the first layer of protection against any suspicion. John became his first unwitting target in that competitive environment. The young man was working on a complex residential project, a luxury condominium with an innovative design. Noah began to subtly approach him, praising his work during coffee breaks. John was a loner by nature. He didn't have many friends at the office. When Noah showed genuine interest in his company, John opened the doors of his trust to him. They began having lunch together a few times a week, talking about work and personal life. Noah discovered that John lived alone in a small apartment a few blocks from the office. He worked late into the night on his projects, striving for perfection in every detail. He was the type of person who put his heart into everything he did, and that made him vulnerable. One Friday, Noah suggested they go to John's house to relax after an intense week. He showed up with imported beers and snacks, saying they needed to unwind a bit. John was happy with the company. He wasn't used to having visitors. The evening began lightly, with conversations about movies and funny stories from college. Noah kept John's glass full, while drinking little of his own. He steered the conversation toward topics that made John feel excited and distracted. When John finally fell asleep on the couch, exhausted and drunk, Noah felt his heart race. He went to the computer that was on John's desk, the screen still showing the project in progress. With trembling hands, Noah plugged in his flash drive and copied all the files. At that moment, a part of Noah screamed for him to stop, that this was wrong. But another, stronger part remembered the pride in his father's eyes, the apartment they had acquired, the success they couldn't afford to lose. He turned off the computer, covered John with a blanket, and left quietly. Over the weekend, Noah worked frantically on the project modifications. He altered some measurements, changed specific materials, and adjusted the facade just enough to make it look different. On Monday, he arrived at the office excited and presented the project to his supervisor, even before John had finished his. The supervisor was impressed by the innovation and technical quality of Noah's work. He publicly praised the young engineer during the morning meeting, drawing admiring glances from his colleagues. John arrived an hour later, unaware that his weeks of work had been stolen. When John finally presented his project days later, the supervisor frowned. He commented that it looked very similar to the work Noah had already presented, with only a few superficial differences. John was confused and embarrassed, unable to understand how that was possible. Noah feigned surprise and discomfort with the whole situation. He even defended John in front of the others, saying it was surely just a coincidence. But internally, Noah felt a toxic mix of guilt and satisfaction with the outcome. That episode repeated itself several times in the following months, with different colleagues. Noah always found a way to get close, gain their trust, and access their work. He had become a master of emotional manipulation, of saying exactly what people wanted to hear. Marcus was next. Then came Jennifer, a newly hired engineer full of fresh ideas. With each stolen project, Noah climbed another rung on the corporate ladder. He received praise, bonuses, and promises of promotions that would come soon. But something began to change in the office environment. Colleagues started whispering when Noah approached, and suspicious glances became more frequent. John, especially, seemed to avoid him after that strange episode. Noah was trying to ignore the growing tension, convincing himself it was just paranoia. He called his parents every week, telling them about his achievements and hearing the pride in Addison's voice. Daisy always asked if he was happy, if it was all worth it, and Noah always lied, saying yes. In one of those calls, Addison recounted that he was showing his son's projects to his former construction colleagues. He carried colourful printouts in his pocket, proudly displaying his son's engineering work. Noah hung up the phone that night and stared at the dark ceiling of his room for hours. He thought about confessing everything, about admitting that he wasn't the genius everyone thought he was, but the fear of disappointment, of shame, of failure, was greater than any impulse to be honest. Noah decided he would continue, that he would just be more careful, more discreet. What he didn't know was that Sophia had already noticed the strange patterns. She began documenting coincidences, observing Noah's behavior with scientific attention. The net was slowly closing in around him, and Noah followed, blinded by his own arrogance. The web gets complicated. 6 months had passed since Noah started working at Morrison Associates. He now occupied a larger cubicle, closer to the supervisor's room, a clear symbol of his meteoric success. But the weight of his choices was beginning to manifest itself in ways Noah hadn't expected. Nights of peaceful sleep became rare, replaced by insomnia and recurring nightmares. Noah dreamed that he was in a meeting room, presenting a project, when suddenly all his colleagues stood up and accused him. He would wake up sweating, his heart racing, and it would take him a few minutes to remember that it was just a dream. During the day, Noah maintained the facade of a confident and successful professional. But small cracks were beginning to appear in this carefully constructed facade. His hands trembled slightly when he got coffee in the break room, and his eyes avoided direct contact for too long. John practically stopped talking to him after the project incident. The shy boy now ate lunch alone again, but with a different expression on his face, more closed off and suspicious. Whenever Noah passed by his desk, John would cover the papers protectively with his arms. Marcus also changed his behavior, becoming even more reserved about his work. He started using complex passwords for his files and never left anything open on the screen when he left his desk. Noah noticed these changes, but pretended they meant nothing. Jennifer, the engineer from whom Noah had stolen an innovative bridge design, requested a transfer to another branch. At her farewell party, Noah noticed that few colleagues spoke to him beyond the necessary formalities. He felt isolated in the crowd, holding a glass of wine he had no desire to drink. It was at this party that Sophia approached him more intentionally for the first time. She wore a simple navy blue dress, her brown hair was styled in a bun, and delicate glasses framed attentive brown eyes. Sophia smiled and asked how Noah was adjusting to the company's intense pace. Noah sensed something different in that conversation, a sharp intelligence behind Sophia's kind words. She asked specific questions about his creative process, how he developed his ideas, where he drew his inspiration from. He responded with vague, rehearsed answers, but he noticed that Sophia was observing every micro-expression on his face. In the following days, Sophia began to appear more frequently in Noah's professional life. She suggested group lunches, inviting various colleagues, including Noah, for discussions about projects. During these conversations, Sophia always steered specific technical questions that made Noah uncomfortable. Noah began obsessively researching architecture and design during his nights. He watched videos, read articles, and tried to absorb knowledge he should have acquired in college. But theory didn't replace practice, and he knew his knowledge was superficial compared to his peers. One day, during an important meeting with a client, the supervisor asked Noah to explain the inspiration behind one of his projects. Noah began to speak, but realized that his words sounded empty, rehearsed, lacking the genuine passion that true creators demonstrate. The client looked suspicious and asked specific technical questions that Noah had difficulty answering satisfactorily. After the meeting, the supervisor called Noah into his office for the first time with a serious expression. He said that the client had doubts about Noah's technical abilities and that he seemed insecure when talking about his own work. Noah left that room feeling the ground disappear beneath his feet, the illusion of security finally beginning to crumble. That night, Noah called home and talked at length with Daisy. He almost confessed everything, the words on the tip of his tongue, but he backed down at the last moment. Daisy sensed something wrong in her son's voice and asked if he was truly happy, if all that sacrifice was worth it. Noah answered yes, but for the first time his mother didn't seem to believe him. She said that Addison was planning to visit him, wanted to see the office and see her son in action. Panic gripped Noah at this news. The idea of his father finding out the truth was unbearable. He made up excuses about very busy weeks, urgent projects, important meetings he couldn't miss. Daisy sighed on the other end of the line and said her father would be disappointed but would understand. Noah hung up feeling worse than before, guilt weighing like lead on his chest. The following week, Sophia began to approach Noah in a different way. She started smiling more when she saw him, making casual comments about movies and restaurants. Noah, lacking genuine connections and isolated from his other classmates, began to respond positively. They started having lunch together, just the two of them, talking about things other than work. Sophia was intelligent and funny. She had a way of making Noah feel seen and understood. He began to develop real feelings for her, something he hadn't expected to happen. Sophia suggested they have dinner at an Italian restaurant downtown. The evening was pleasant, with red wine and conversations flowing naturally under the soft lights. Noah found himself thinking that maybe he could have something real with her, something not based on lies. After dinner, they strolled through the city's lit streets, the cool night air bringing a sense of normalcy. Sophia mentioned she'd like to see Noah's apartment better, to see how he lived outside the office. Noah agreed without hesitation, happy to share his space with someone who seemed genuinely interested in him. In the apartment, Sophia complimented the minimalist decor, the books on the shelf, the plants on the balcony. She asked to use the bathroom, and Noah went to prepare drinks in the kitchen, whistling softly. What he didn't see was Sophia discreetly exploring the home office, her eyes scanning the files on the desk. They talked late into the night, sitting on the sofa, and for the first time in months, Noah felt truly relaxed. Sophia was different. She seemed to see the real him, not just the perfect image he projected. When she left that night, Noah stood on the balcony, looking at the city lights and smiling. He had no idea that Sophia had discreetly photographed compromising documents in his office. He didn't know that each of her smiles hid a calculated purpose, built on the suspicion of her colleagues. Noah was falling in love with the person who would be his downfall. The following months brought a false sense of normalcy. Noah continued to steal projects when he felt his performance was at risk, but now less frequently. Sophia had become a constant presence in his life, regular dinners, weekends together, deep conversations about dreams and fears. Noah even considered confessing everything to her, asking for help to get out of that situation, but the fear of rejection and judgment always held him back at the last moment. He chose to continue living the lie, believing he could control the situation indefinitely. What Noah didn't realize was that time was running out. Each visit from Sophia to his apartment brought more evidence for the dossier she and her colleagues were secretly building. The trap was complete. All that was missing was the right moment to trigger it. The net closes. Noah woke up on a Tuesday morning feeling that something was different in the air. There was a palpable tension in the office when he arrived, conversations that abruptly ceased as he passed. He tried to greet some colleagues as usual, but received only cold nods in response. Marcus was meeting with John and other engineers in a conference room with the blinds drawn. Noah could see through a crack that they were analyzing documents spread out on the table, serious expressions on everyone's faces. His stomach clenched with a bad feeling, but he tried to ignore it and focus on his work. Sophia wasn't at her desk that morning, which was unusual. She always arrived promptly at 8 o'clock, but now it was past 9, and there was no sign of her. Noah texted her asking if everything was all right, but didn't receive an immediate reply. The supervisor, Mr. Whitmore, a man with grey hair and impeccable posture, walked down the hall with a heavy expression. He looked at Noah in a way he never had before, a mixture of disappointment and something close to suppressed anger. Noah felt his blood run cold, but he didn't know exactly why. During the coffee break, Noah went to the break room and found 2 colleagues talking quietly. When he entered, they immediately fell silent and left without looking him in the eye. Noah poured coffee into his cup with trembling hands, the loneliness of that moment weighing on him more than ever. He returned to his desk and tried to focus on a new project he had started, but the words on the computer seemed blurry, his mind racing in 1,000 directions, trying to understand what was happening. Noah knew deep down that the house of cards he had built was about to collapse. Sophia finally showed up at the office around 11 in the morning. She avoided Noah's gaze and went straight to the conference room where the other colleagues were still gathered. Noah watched through the glass as she handed a thick folder to Marcus, who opened it and began to carefully review it. Noah's phone rang, startling him. It was Mr. Whitmore's secretary. She formally requested that he be in the main meeting room at 2 o'clock sharp. Noah asked what it was about, but she simply repeated the time and hung up. The next 3 hours were the longest of Noah's life. He couldn't eat lunch, his stomach churning with anxiety that grew with each passing minute. He tried to work, but could only stare blankly at the screen, the numbers and lines making absolutely no sense. Noah thought about calling his parents, but what would he say if it really was what he feared? He thought about running away, grabbing his things and never coming back, starting over in another city, but his feet seemed glued to the ground, paralyzed between fear and a strange need to finally face the consequences. At 1:45 p.m., Noah rose like a condemned man walking to the scaffold. He adjusted his tie in the bathroom, looked at his reflection in the mirror, and saw a stranger staring back. Who was this man he had become? When exactly had he lost himself? Noah walked down the silent hallway to the main meeting room. Through the glass walls, he could see that the room was full of people. Mr. Whitmore was there, along with the Human Resources Director, and all his fellow engineers. When Noah opened the door, the silence was deafening. All eyes turned to him, and Noah felt as if he were naked before that makeshift courtroom. He was invited to sit in a secluded chair facing everyone, like a defendant before a jury. Mr. Whitmore began to speak in a deep, controlled voice. He said that the company had become aware of some very serious irregularities involving Noah's work. The words seemed to come from a great distance, as if Noah were underwater. Marcus was the first to stand up and present evidence. He showed 2 designs side by side on the big screen, one signed by him and the other by Noah, practically identical. He explained the dates, showing that his was done first but presented later in a mysterious way. John then stood up, his voice trembling but firm in his accusation. He recounted the night Noah showed up with drinks, how he had woken up to find his computer off but was certain he had left it on. He showed logs of file access that had occurred while he was asleep. One by one, other colleagues stood up, sharing similar stories. Jennifer, who had transferred, participated via video conference and recounted her experience. Each testimony was a stab in Noah's chest, the stark truth of his crimes being exposed without mercy. Then it was Sophia's turn to stand up, and Noah felt his heart break in a different way. She avoided looking directly at him as she opened a folder full of documents and photographs. Sophia explained that, after her colleagues' suspicions, she volunteered to get closer to Noah and look for concrete evidence. She showed photos she had discreetly taken in Noah's apartment, compromising documents scattered around his personal office. There were screenshots of conversations where Noah suspiciously asked for too much help, always trying to see other people's work. There were even audio recordings of conversations where Noah had let slip details he should not have known about other people's projects. Noah looked at Sophia for the first time during her presentation. She finally met his gaze, and for a brief second he saw something that looked like remorse in her eyes. But then she looked away and continued presenting the evidence systematically. It had all been a lie, Noah realized with growing horror. The dinners, the deep conversations, the moments he thought were genuine. It was all part of an investigation. Sophia had never felt anything for him. She was just an actress, fulfilling a mission to protect her colleagues' jobs. Mr. Whitmore asked Noah to speak up, to explain his version of events. Noah opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat was completely dry. What could he say in the face of so much evidence, so many witnesses, so much inconvenient truth? He considered denying everything, inventing an elaborate story about misunderstandings and coincidences. But looking at all those faces he had betrayed, Noah simply couldn't keep lying. Something inside him definitively broke at that moment, the exhaustion of maintaining the charade finally overwhelming him. Noah lowered his head and, in an almost inaudible voice, admitted everything. He spoke of his struggles since college, of the pressure to meet his father's expectations. He talked about the fear of failure, about how a small lie had turned into an unstoppable snowball. Tears streamed down Noah's face as he apologized. He knew apologies weren't enough, that the damage was done and irreparable. But he needed to say it. He needed them to know that he understood the gravity of what he had done. The silence that followed Noah's confession was as heavy as lead. The human resources director announced that Noah was immediately suspended and would be dismissed for cause. He would have 1 hour to collect his personal belongings under supervision, and then he should leave the building. Noah rose from his chair, his legs trembling, the world spinning around him. He glanced one last time at Sophia, who was now silently weeping in her chair. Perhaps she had developed some genuine feelings amidst the charade, but that didn't change anything that had happened. Accompanied by a security guard, Noah returned to his old desk. He placed his few personal belongings in a cardboard box: family photos, a coffee mug, some books. His colleagues watched from afar, some angrily, others with something close to pity. As Noah walked past the reception desk carrying the box, the receptionist, who always greeted him cheerfully, looked away. He got into the elevator alone, pressed the ground floor button, and watched the numbers decrease. Each floor that descended seemed to symbolize a layer of his life crumbling. The weight of truth. Noah left the Morrison Associates building under a grey sky that threatened rain. The cardboard box weighed heavily in his arms, not from its physical weight, but from the symbolism of everything he had lost. He walked through the busy streets without a specific destination, simply wanting to get away from that place as quickly as possible. People hurried past him, each absorbed in their own lives and problems. Noah felt a profound loneliness, a sensation of being completely disconnected from the world around him. He stopped at a park bench and sat down, placing the box beside him, his hands trembling uncontrollably. The reality of what had happened began to settle in like a crushing weight on his chest. Noah no longer had a job, no reputation, no future in engineering. The news would surely spread through the market. No serious company would hire him after this. He picked up his cell phone and saw dozens of unread messages, but he didn't have the courage to open any of them. They were probably colleagues commenting on the scandal, maybe even reporters from architecture websites. Noah turned off his phone and watched the children playing in the nearby playground, their laughter echoing in the cold afternoon. The rain began to fall, a light drizzle at first, then more intense. Noah didn't move, letting the water soak his expensive clothes and his carefully combed hair. It was as if the rain could wash away more than just dirt. Perhaps it could purify the shame he felt. After nearly an hour sitting in the rain, Noah finally stood up. He needed to go home. He needed to think about what he would do now, how he would rebuild his life from the rubble. But first of all, there was a conversation he could no longer postpone. Noah arrived at his apartment soaked, leaving a trail of water across the wooden floor. He took a hot shower that lasted almost half an hour, as if trying to wash away more than just the rain. He put on comfortable clothes and sat on the sofa, the phone in his hand weighing as heavy as a stone. He called home and Daisy answered on the second ring, her voice as cheerful as ever. She began to talk about her day, about how excited Addison was preparing a new barbecue grill in the backyard. Noah gently interrupted her and said he needed to tell her something important. There was a pause on the other end of the line, Daisy noticing the seriousness in her son's tone. Noah took a deep breath and began to recount everything from the beginning, from college to that terrible day. He omitted nothing, every lie, every stolen project, every betrayal of his colleagues' trust. Daisy remained silent throughout the confession, only breathing softly on the other end. When Noah finished, his voice was choked with emotion, tears streaming freely down his face. He apologized repeatedly, saying he had disappointed everyone, especially his father. Daisy's voice finally came, softer than Noah had expected. She said she was sad not because of the dishonor, but because of the pain he had carried alone for so long. She asked why he had never spoken about his difficulties, why he had chosen to suffer in silence instead of asking for help. Noah explained his fear of disappointing Addison, of destroying the dream his father had for him. Daisy sighed deeply and said she needed to tell him something she should have said a long time ago. She revealed that Addison had always known Noah wanted to study business administration, not engineering. Noah was shocked. It didn't make sense with everything he had assumed. Daisy explained that her father only wanted his son to have opportunities he never had, but never wanted to force him into anything. Addison had mentioned several times to her that if Noah wanted to change courses, he would fully support him. Daisy's words fell on Noah like a devastating revelation. All that lying and suffering had been based on a wrong assumption from the start. He had built an imaginary prison and thrown away the key, all out of pride and fear of an honest conversation. Daisy said she would put Addison on the line, that they needed to talk. Noah wanted to protest, but she had already passed the phone before he could say anything. Addison's deep voice came through the line, cautious but not hostile. Noah repeated the whole story to his father, each word hurting more than the last. He expected shouts, insults, total rejection, but none of that came. Addison remained silent for a long moment after the confession, and Noah could hear her heavy breathing. Finally, Addison spoke, his voice hoarse with restrained emotion. He said he was disappointed, yes, but not because of the engineering failure. He was disappointed because Noah hadn't trusted him enough to be honest about his true desires. Addison said he spent his whole life working with his hands because he never had a choice. He wanted Noah to have choices, the freedom to be who he truly was, not a version of what his father imagined. Addison's dream was never to have an engineer son, it was simply to have a happy and fulfilled son. Noah broke down in sobs upon hearing those words, years of tension and guilt finally finding an outlet. Addison said that no matter what had happened, Noah was still his son and would always be welcome at home. He suggested that Noah come home for a while, regroup, and figure out what he really wanted to do with his life. After hanging up the phone, Noah sat in the darkness of the apartment for hours. He thought about the entire journey that had led him there, every wrong decision, every lie he had told. But he also thought about something new, a small spark of something that could be hope. For the first time in years, Noah no longer needed to pretend to be someone he wasn't. The mask had fallen, the charade was over, and however painful it was, there was a strange liberation in it. He was at rock bottom, but at least now he knew where he was, and could begin to truly climb. Noah picked up an old notebook he'd kept since adolescence. He began writing down everything he felt, everything he thought, a brutal exercise in honesty with himself. He wrote about his true interests, about management and numbers, about who he really wanted to be. In the pages of that notebook, Noah began to draw a different path. Perhaps it wasn't too late to start over, to study what he truly loved, to build something authentic. It would be difficult, even humiliating, but it would be real, and that was worth more than any success based on lies. Night had completely fallen over the city, and Noah finally allowed himself to feel something other than guilt. He felt shame, yes, but also a growing determination to do things differently from now on. The first step would be to go back home, face his father in the eye, and begin to rebuild from the rubble. Noah looked out the window at the city lights twinkling in the darkness. Each light represented a life, each life with its own battles and secrets. He wasn't alone in his imperfection. He was just paying the price for hiding his for so long. The encounter with the mirror. 2 weeks had passed since Noah was fired from Morrison Associates. He had decided not to immediately return to his parents' house. He needed to process everything alone first. The apartment that had once been a symbol of success now felt like a cell, each room echoing with memories of his lies. Noah spent his days in a strange routine of introspection and planning. He would wake up late, make coffee, and sit on the porch watching the city awaken below. People came and went, each carrying their invisible burdens, and Noah wondered how many also hid heavy secrets. He began researching business administration courses, MBA programs, and possibilities for a fresh start. But every time he opened a university website, shame paralyzed him again. How would he explain the gap in his resume, the dismissal for cause, the irreparable stain on his reputation? One Thursday morning, Noah received a call from an unknown number. He hesitated before answering, but something compelled him to accept the call. On the other end of the line was Sophia, her voice sounding different, more vulnerable than he remembered. She asked to meet, saying they needed to talk about everything that had happened. Noah wanted to refuse immediately, the wound of betrayal still very fresh in his chest, but a part of him was curious. He needed to understand why she had done that, if there was any truth amidst the lies. They arranged to meet at a discreet cafe far from the center, a place where they wouldn't run into any mutual acquaintances. Noah arrived first and chose a table in the back, his sweaty hands holding a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. When Sophia entered, he noticed she looked different, more tired, her eyes lacking the calculated glint they usually had. She sat in silence, ordered some tea, and stirred her spoon in the cup without looking directly at Noah. The silence between them was dense, heavy with all the unspoken words and painful truths. Finally, Sophia began to speak in a low, trembling voice. She explained that initially the mission was simple: get close to Noah and obtain proof of the fraud. Her colleagues were desperate, seeing their work being stolen without being able to prove anything. Sophia volunteered because she was the only one Noah hadn't yet manipulated, the only one who still had clean access to him. But something happened that she didn't expect, Sophia continued, her voice growing increasingly emotional. Spending time with Noah, she began to see beyond the manipulator. She began to see the frightened person behind the mask. She realized that Noah wasn't a calculating villain, but someone deeply lost and afraid. Sophia admitted that she developed real feelings during those months of charade. She found herself genuinely laughing at his jokes, genuinely interested in his childhood stories. There were times when she wanted to tell him everything, stop the investigation, simply be honest with him. But she had a responsibility to the colleagues who had been wronged, and Noah needed to understand that too. Each stolen project represented months of someone's work, dreams, and aspirations being usurped without remorse. Sophia had to choose between her confused feelings and doing the right thing for her betrayed friends. Noah listened to everything in silence, processing each word with a mixture of anger and understanding. He finally looked her in the eyes and said he understood, that in her place he probably would have done the same. But that didn't lessen the pain. It didn't erase the feeling of having been used exactly as he had used others. Sophia agreed, tears streaming down her face without her trying to hide them. She said she'd been having nightmares ever since that day in the meeting room, seeing Noah's face crumbling. As much as he deserved consequences, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had crossed some moral line as well. Noah reached across the table and briefly took Sophia's hand. He said that they had both done wrong things, but for human reasons. Understandable, though not justifiable. Perhaps the weight of guilt was the price they both needed to pay to learn and grow. They talked for over 2 hours in that discreet cafe. Noah recounted his conversation with his parents, the devastating revelation that it had all been a misunderstanding. Sophia shared her own story of family pressures and expectations that had almost made her give up on engineering several times. There was a cruel irony there. 2 people who could have truly helped each other ended up destroying one another. If Noah had been honest from the beginning, if Sophia hadn't needed to pretend, perhaps something real could have blossomed. But the world doesn't work with hypotheses, only with the consequences of the choices we actually make. Before parting ways, Sophia handed Noah a sealed envelope. She said it was a letter of recommendation focused on his actual skills, mathematics and numerical analysis. It didn't mention architectural projects, only the genuine skills Noah actually possessed. Noah was surprised by the gesture. He hadn't expected any kind of help from her. Sophia explained that punishment was necessary, but completely destroying a person wasn't justice. It was cruelty. She believed that Noah could find his true path if he stopped trying to be someone he wasn't. They stood up to leave and remained face to face for an awkward moment. Sophia leaned down and lightly kissed Noah's cheek, a gesture of farewell and silent forgiveness. Noah felt a lump in his throat but managed a slight smile, a sad but genuine smile. Leaving the cafe, Noah walked through the streets without any hurry to get anywhere. He thought about how complex life was, how there were no pure villains or immaculate heroes. Everyone was just a person trying to navigate their own storms, making mistakes and trying to get it right. Noah looked at the envelope in his hand and felt something close to gratitude, not for what was written inside, but for what that gesture symbolized. Sophia had given him something he had never had before, an honest assessment of who he really was. That night, Noah finally called his parents and said he would be coming home for the weekend. Addison was clearly thrilled with the news, saying that his room was always ready. Daisy simply said that she would prepare his favorite dish and that they were waiting for him. Noah began to pack his things slowly, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. He separated all his engineering diplomas and certificates, storing them in a box at the back of the closet. He wasn't ready to throw them away, but he also didn't need to display them like false trophies anymore. He picked up that old notebook where he had begun writing his truths. He read the pages again and realized that there lay the beginning of something real, something truly his. Noah smiled to himself, a tired but hopeful smile, and continued writing until late at night. The full moon illuminated the apartment through the open window. Noah could hear the sounds of the city outside, life happening in every direction. He didn't know exactly what would come next, but for the first time in years, he was willing to find out honestly. The truth that sets you free. Noah arrived at his parents' house on a sunny Saturday afternoon, a stark contrast to the weight in his heart. The exposed brick house was located in a quiet suburban neighborhood with a garden meticulously tended by Daisy. He parked the car in the driveway and stood there for a few minutes, simply staring at the front door and taking a deep breath. Before he could get out of the car, the door opened and Addison appeared on the porch. The large man with calloused hands, whom Noah so feared disappointing, stood there with shining eyes. Noah got out of the car and walked slowly toward his father, unsure of what to expect. Addison opened his arms and enveloped his son in a tight hug, as strong as his hard-working hands. He said nothing, only held Noah as he finally allowed the tears to flow freely. Daisy appeared right behind, drying her hands on her apron, her eyes also brimming with tears at the sight of the two men embracing. They entered the house, and Noah felt the familiarity of the place envelop him like a warm blanket. The kitchen table was set, his favorite dish already emitting a delicious aroma. The three of them sat down and ate in comfortable silence, simply enjoying being together again. After dinner, Addison invited Noah for a walk around the neighborhood. They walked side by side along the quiet streets, the streetlights beginning to come on with the twilight. Addison began to speak, her deep but gentle voice echoing in the cooling afternoon. He recounted that when he was young, he too had tried to be something he wasn't. Addison tried working in offices, wearing suits, being what he thought society valued. But he was miserable there, feeling like a fish trying to fly, until he accepted that his place was on construction sites. The secret Addison never told Noah was simple but profound. Happiness doesn't come from doing what others expect of you, but from accepting who you truly are. He never wanted Noah to be an engineer to impress anyone. He simply wanted his son to have more options than he had. Addison stopped walking and looked directly into Noah's eyes with intensity. He said that Noah's biggest mistake wasn't stealing designs. It was not trusting his father enough to be honest. He would have supported any path Noah chose as long as it was true and brought real satisfaction. Noah felt as if a gigantic weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. He realized he had wasted years building a false persona to please an expectation that never truly existed. The secret he so feared to reveal never needed to be a secret. The prison was of his own making. They returned home and sat on the porch under the starry sky. Addison told stories of when Noah was a child, always curious, always asking questions about how things worked. He remembered how Noah organized his toys by category, how he loved making lists and detailed plans. That was always administration, Addison said, smiling. Noah just didn't have a name for it yet. His talent was always there. Organizing, planning, seeing the big picture and making the pieces fit together. Forcing him into engineering was like trying to plant a rose in the wrong soil. It might grow, but it never fully blooms. Noah asked his father if he wasn't disappointed with everything that had happened. Addison thought for a moment before answering honestly. He said he was sad for his son's suffering, sad that Noah felt he needed to lie for so long, but disappointed with who Noah really was, never. Addison explained that mistakes are part of growing up, that everyone stumbles on the path to finding themselves. What matters is not never falling, but having the courage to get up and do things differently afterward. Daisy joined them on the porch, bringing hot chocolate for the three of them. She sat beside Noah and held his hand with maternal tenderness. She said something Noah would never forget for the rest of his life. The real secret to happiness is accepting that you don't need to be perfect to be loved. The people who truly matter will love you with all your flaws and limitations. And the people who only love your achievements never truly loved you to begin with. Noah felt a profound peace wash over him for the first time in years. He realized he had spent so much time trying to be extraordinary that he had forgotten that being true to himself was enough. The secret everyone seeks is not in being the best, but in being authentic. That night, lying in his childhood bed, Noah picked up that notebook again. He wrote about his true passions, about numbers and strategies, about management and organization. He wrote about wanting to help companies grow, about loving the logic of business and the challenge of administration. For the first time, his words flowed naturally, without forcing, without pretending. Noah realized that this was how it should be, doing something that felt natural instead of a constant battle. The secret wasn't becoming brilliant, it was discovering the brilliance that already existed within him. In the following days, Noah researched business administration programs with renewed enthusiasm. He talked to Addison about using his savings to go back to school, this time for what he truly loved. His father not only supported him, but offered to help financially in any way he could. Noah also began to think about how he could repair the damage he had caused. He couldn't undo what he had done, but he could use that experience to help others avoid making the same mistakes. Perhaps he could talk about academic pressure, about mental health, about the importance of honesty, even when it's difficult. The real secret Noah discovered wasn't in hiding his weaknesses. It was in embracing them, learning from them, and using those lessons to build something genuine. He had lost a lot, but he gained something infinitely more valuable: the freedom to be who he truly was. Noah looked out the bedroom window at the moonlit garden. He thought of Sophia, of John, of everyone he had hurt with his lies. He couldn't change the past, but he could ensure that the future would be built on foundations of truth. The ultimate secret Noah understood as sleep finally came was simple. There is no shortcut to a meaningful life, no substitute for authenticity. You can fool the whole world, but you will never fool yourself into true peace. True new beginnings. 6 months had passed since Noah returned home. He was enrolled in a business administration program, this time studying what he truly loved. The classes made sense. Each concept resonated with who he really was. Noah no longer hid his story, speaking openly about his mistakes when appropriate. Some judged him, others distanced themselves, but he accepted this as part of the consequences. The people who stayed were those who valued honesty more than perfection. Addison visited frequently, proud to see his son finally finding his true path. Daisy said Noah seemed lighter, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. And it was true. Noah could finally breathe without carrying the weight of so many lies. He still thought about the colleagues he had hurt. The guilt would never completely disappear, but Noah learned that carrying healthy guilt was different from drowning in it. One motivated him to be better, the other only kept him trapped in the past. Noah looked out the window of the university library, students coming and going on their own journeys. He smiled slightly, grateful to have been given a second chance to do things right. Life hadn't been kind, but it had been fair. And that was all he could ask for. Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever felt the weight of trying to be someone you're not? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends.